In this interview, distinguished Toastmaster Patty Adams stresses the importance of preparation when evaluating speeches. Let's dive in as Patty shares how she prepares herself and the speaker. Well, hello, everybody. I have with me today our guest, Patty Adams. Now, Patty Adams has been a Toastmaster for almost 20 years. She's from District 77. This is the Alabama, Western Florida Panhandle, and Southeast Mississippi. She has enjoyed her journey with Toastmasters, and she has learned a great deal. Patty is competent and a savvy speaker and a leader. And we are honored to tap into her genius today. So welcome, distinguished Toastmaster Patty Adams.
Thank you so much, Roger, and I'm excited about this opportunity to be able to hear questions about evaluations and table topics. Let's get started.
Excellent. Now, as you alluded to, we are going to focus on two topics today in terms of table topics and evaluation. Those two may be some of the more difficult part of becoming a Toastmaster. Some of our newer members sometimes will try to move away because they're saying, hey, look, I'm afraid of public speaking. And now you want me to speak impromptu with no thinking? And if I'm just getting started, how in the world am I going to evaluate someone else? So let's dive into these two big topics. Let's start off with evaluation. I want to ask you, I want to tap into your mindset, Patty. What is your mindset when it comes to evaluating someone's speech? How do you go from your observation to formulating your verbal feedback and to your written evaluation? Tell us, what's your thought process in evaluating a speech?
Thank you so much, Roger. I absolutely love evaluations. And before I even get into the go-to method, I want our viewers to know that most importantly, some of the things that you need to do is be a good listener. Be attentive. Take notes and make sure you have a good closing. The way that I process this method is if you're up to speak and you're working on a certain project or a certain path, I typically will go and learn a little something about that path or that project. That helps me a great deal. Even something as simple as knowing what the title of your speech is can help a great deal. So I'll give you a quick example to let you know what I'm talking about, how I go from observing to the verbal feedback and then to an actual written evaluation. When I'm observing, we had a gentleman that did a speech on leadership style. I wanted to know something about the leadership style. So long before the meeting, I researched leadership styles. In doing that, I learned that there was a lot of different ones. But when I looked at his title, it said another style. So that let me know that he was not probably going to go with what we consider the customary leadership style. He was going to be doing something totally different. So that piqued my curiosity. A lot of times it would be helpful if you actually call or text or email, whichever form of communication you want to use, to that speaker so you can find out if there's a specific thing that they want you to be looking out for. Here's another example. I constantly pull my ear when I'm speaking. So I really want Evaluator Roger to take note of any time I do that. Once I've taken down all the notes and that person, the Toastmaster, comes up to speak, I listen, I'm attentive, and I'm writing notes. I don't want to be too distracted, so I don't take a lot of notes. I only take things that I feel like are most important. Key words, descriptive word, maybe some key phrases, something that definitely ties into the title and ties into the meat of that speech. From that point, I'm able to give a verbal evaluation based on those things. And I will point out one of the methods that I love the most is considered PIE. And the way that I learned PIE and helped me to remember was you give praise first, and then you give improvement, and last, you encourage them to practice. And that's exactly what I do when I'm giving an evaluation. I really focus on those three methods. It's also in some cases called the sandwich method. So you kind of have the top level, lower, and then you have the middle, and then you have the closing. You need it to somehow all connect together. And then as far as the written, I typically will actually write it out when others are speaking take a couple of notes here or there, or maybe during table topics, so that I can give them that written evaluation before they leave the meeting. Or in the case of an online presenters, Toastmasters, I can actually email them that evaluation. Sometimes they don't care about getting the written until later, so I may not send it to them until the next day. But that's my typical method of how I move from A to B to C within giving evaluations.
Now let's continue on. You talked about using the pie method in terms of praise and then items that they can improve on and some encouragement. What other presentation methods in terms of evaluation have you used?
The other presentation methods that I use is I cannot stress enough about making sure that you know something about that project and that speech. You have to be able to bring something to the table when you're given an evaluation. Let's say that person is doing a PowerPoint presentation. Then I really want to pay attention to the PowerPoint slides. Make sure that they're not being cut off. Make sure that they're not too wordy. All the things that goes in with giving a good presentation. I also want to make sure that I look presentable, but I don't want to look so flashy to where I take away from what they're wearing, because I don't want the focus on me. The same goes with words. I've been in situations to where evaluations was done, and when they got through, you remember nothing about the speech. You remembered everything about the evaluation. That's not the way to do it. One of the other key things that I want to point out, and I know you're talking about presentation style, and so this for me will fit in. I've been in situations to where I've heard an evaluation given to a new member, and they cut that new member down so much to where I would never want to ever speak again. I know I give a lot of examples, but that will help the person who's listening, the viewer listening, to know what I'm talking about. If I just gave a speech and someone comes back and they tell me, "Oh, Patty, that is the most horrible speech I've ever heard in my life. Nothing connected. I'm not even sure what you were talking about. You told me something about the train, but it didn't fit." And they just kind of go way off topic. And they never praise me. They never encourage me. They never tell me what I can do better. I typically speak fast. And the first evaluations that I received, probably for the first 4 years in Toastmasters, was, "You speak way too fast." That was good information for me to have. But in 4 years, you would think that they would give me something else to go on. Surely that was something else that I could have improved upon to do better. Most importantly, just make sure that when you're doing the evaluation that it's positive, that it's uplifting, but you also want it to be honest. You also don't want your evaluation to not be sincere. Help them, but also praise them.
One of the things that you've mentioned a couple of times is preparing ahead of time by being familiar with the project that the speaker is working on, whether it's the path that they're on or the specific project, so that now you have more context when it comes to evaluating them. Contrast that with your knowledge of the speaker. So if this is a brand new Toastmaster who just came to your club, or maybe they are not a novice, they've been around, but this is the first time you've heard them. This is the first time they joined your club. How do you compare or contrast those two issues, or incorporate those two things in terms of this is the project that they're working on with certain criteria and requirement and focus on. And then you have this particular speaker whom you have some experience on the one end, one extreme, or the other extreme where it's a stranger. This is the first time you heard them. How would you handle these differences?
Thank you again, Roger. It is quite a different way when you are evaluating a person who may have just come to Toastmasters and a person who is considered an advanced Toastmasters. I won't say you have to use kid gloves when you're evaluating a first-time speaker, but you do want to take in consideration that they may have never in their life, not only in Toastmasters, but nowhere else ever received an evaluation. So I will say that I spend a little more time with praising them than with criticizing them, and it's good criticism and bad criticism. I'm sure you know that. So let's take the inexperienced Toastmaster first. I don't know anything about them. They just joined the club on last week. All I know is their name They come into the club. Hi, I'm Patti. I'm the Vice President of Education. Welcome to Families Toastmaster. We're going to rename the Toastmasters right now. And I first would ask them a couple of things like, you're going to be evaluated tonight. Make sure you get with your evaluation team. So they get with Roger because Roger's going to do the evaluation. I may sit in as the general evaluation to make sure that Roger's going to ask all the right questions, because since I don't know this person and they don't even know what evaluation is, I will spend some time explaining to them, this is how evaluation works. This is what we will be looking for. Make sure that they have their form. I can't tell you how many times I've evaluated non-experienced and experienced Toastmasters, and they have nothing in which I can go with. That's why I kind of hinted so much on try to learn these things ahead of time. Because if you get to that meeting, you don't have a clue on the path or the project or what they're doing, chances are you're not going to give a good evaluation. When you're doing an advanced or experienced Toastmaster, they should already know the rules of the game. They should know that you need to have this form. But because they're so advanced and because they're so experienced, if you don't take out that time with them to find out what path and project they're working on, you're not going to know what their objectives are. Knowing the objectives are key. You're going to have different objectives if you're doing a visionary communication project. Same if you're doing, name another path for me, Roger.
A presentation mastery.
A presentation master speech. All of those are going to come with different objectives. And so by knowing that, that's going to give you one leg up on making sure that that evaluation that you give them is pristine. One of the things that I've incorporated is after everything's over with, I go back to that speaker. Maybe it's the next day or when time permits, 2 days, and ask them, DT and Roger, I gave you an evaluation on your speech. How do you think it went? Do you think it was fair? Do you think there's things you can improve upon? And how would you like to evaluate me? Did you like my style evaluation? Those type of things let that speaker know that it wasn't just a meeting. It wasn't just something to say to impress other people, but that you're genuinely concerned about what they feel about their venture with speaking further on. Not just at the meeting, but in church, at the local bar, if they go bartending, whatever they do, where they need an evaluation, it will let them know that you are really concerned about their life and it goes beyond Toastmasters. Those are some key things that I would like to input.
But let's switch gears slightly. Let's turn the table 180 as a speaker. When you are being evaluated, what would be some of the things that you would consider as a good evaluation? What would you like? If you say, Roger, thank you very much. That's a great feedback of my speech. What would I have done to cause you to say that?
I will go back to what I talked about a little on the reverse of that role. If you had evaluated me, one of the things that would have let me know that you were a really good evaluation was that you were paying attention to me. You wasn't distracted writing notes. You wasn't, looking off into la la land. You wasn't holding your head down. You were actually being attentive to me. When you gave that evaluation, you may have pointed out 2 or 3 key things that I mentioned in that speech. I gave a 3-point speech. Do this, do that, do this, whatever it was. And you actually were listening. So you were able to repeat some of the phrases or some of those points back to me. So again, I just think listening is so critical. Paying attention is extremely critical. And then giving a good closing. I mean, there's nothing better to me than to recap. Patti, when I was evaluating you today, I made mention of the fact that I love the title of your speech. I love the 3 points that you gave. You can work on speaking so fast because some of the members may not be able to keep up, but overall, you did an excellent job. That's why I like the pie method so much, is because it's conclusive. It brings it all together. That's what would let me know. And I like to see evaluators that bring something different to the table than just the norm. After a while, you just get to hear the same blah, 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 blah. And I hate to say that over and over again, but as a 20-year Toastmasters, you can imagine if I keep hearing the same thing, I am going to dread being evaluated. I'm going to be like, okay, we can just skip that part because they're not going to give me anything of value. Your evaluation should add value. I think that's part of the work. It needs to give me something that I can take away, that I can improve upon, come back, and then I can go back to Roger on maybe my 3rd speech or 5th and say, Roger, so how did I do? Did I sit up straight? Did I not play around with my earrings while I was talking? And then you know that you achieved that goal that you set out to do. That's what would make a good evaluation for me.
I heard three things that you just said. Number one, some way to express that they were listening to you, whether it is during during your speech while they're engaging with you in their nonverbal, and or when they're giving their evaluation speech in mentioning some of the details of your speech shows and express that they have been listening. So listening is key. Number two is having that summary, so then make it more conclusive and definitive. Patti, you did A, B, and C well. Work on D and E, and I would love to see you improve in this direction. That kind of a thing. And three, bring something to the table. Add some value. It doesn't have to be fancy per se, but something different, not just necessarily the same thing that we heard over and over again in that sense. So those are the three main things that pops up for you as a speaker receiving feedback.
Yes.
Excellent. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's exactly correct. I was just confirming that what you said is what
Excellent.
I said.
Let's push this a step further. Okay. Let's take this beyond Toastmasters. You have been around for almost 20 years. You had probably, I would imagine, may have received hundreds, if not thousands, of evaluation feedback to you and given evaluations. If we take this concept and this skill set out into, let's say, what I call the regular world, right? The real world, the regular world outside of our Toastmasters universe, how has that training, that experience, that practice impacted your life, let's say, in your personal life, your spouse and kids, friends, or your professional life, in your work, in your church, in your neighbor? How has any of this evaluation process, giving and receiving feedback, impacted your life outside of Toastmasters?
Roger, the way that it's impacted my life outside of Toastmasters is one, and my daughter said it the best, Mom, people are always watching. It really made me know that people were concerned about what I was going to say and how I was going to say it. So it made me be more attentive to what their needs are. One of the critical things that I learned, and I was going to say this earlier, but you'll see how it ties in, is because we are involved with a more diverse group of people. That's within Toastmasters, that's within our corporate world, that's within our churches, and et cetera. We need to know how to communicate with those people. So believe it or not, evaluation is a great way to keep that line of communication open. One of the things that I learned with being in diversity training and going through some groups is, let's just say there are some cultures that do not engage with eye contact. So I'm telling them when I'm evaluating them, oh, you need to give more eye contact, but eye contact for them is extremely offensive. We need to know how to relate to them on what they like and what they can do better, but we also need to be sensitive to maybe they're not going to do better in that area because it's not something they're comfortable with at this time. I spoke to my graduating class of 25,000. And I learned so many different things of the importance of speaking to a group of 3 or 25 and then 25,000. Because obviously if you're speaking to 25,000, eye contact is probably not going to happen because you're going to be on this big stage and they may be far away from you. But I got some amazing evaluations afterwards because every single person felt like I was speaking directly to them. That takes a lot of effort on my part to slowly look to the left, to the middle, to the right without being distracting, and making sure that they're engaged with me. So when you take this to the outside world, I think evaluation is important because it trains you. It gives you the necessary training to know what people are looking for and to make sure that you're reaching a bigger audience than just you and myself.
Great, excellent ideas, excellent concept. Let me close this topic up with this last question, and we can come back later on. If I am brand new to Toastmasters, I've just joined your club, what would be one or two tips that you would give me in terms of becoming a good evaluator? What would be a couple of tips that you can give me to become a good evaluator?
Roger, let me give you a couple of tips on becoming a excellent, I'll go beyond good evaluator. Be sure that you get to know who that person is. Don't let someone come in and out of your club and not communicate with them, especially if you know that you're being called to evaluate that person. Roger, if you're going to evaluate Patti, a simple conversation of, Patti, how are you doing? What is your speech going to be about? Just knowing a little bit about my background, maybe some of my likes and my dislikes would be so valuable, because now you've already built this connection, and I won't feel like a stranger is evaluating me. I will feel like a friend is evaluating me and that they're looking out for my best interest. The other tip that I would say is, when you come to that club, try to come regularly, because chances are if you don't come regularly, you're going to miss a big part of it. Then that way you not only get to see Patti's evaluation style or Cindy's evaluation style or Jane's evaluation style, you get to see several different evaluation styles, and you can learn from each one. And guess what? If you stay for a few minutes after the meeting, you can even come back and ask them, hey, how did you become such a great evaluator? I participated in evaluation contests, and those are a little bit different, because typically you leave the room, you have all of maybe 2 minutes to try to take notes, and then you come back in and they take the paper from you, so you're just kind of thrown out to the wolves. So even with that, that's a different element altogether. But even with contests, you have to know that there's a certain protocol and a certain way that evaluations are done. And if you get good at it, guess what? You may be our next contest winner. Back to you, Roger.
Wonderful. As an evaluator, Patti's preparation often begins before the meeting starts. By understanding the speaker's project and the journey that the speaker is on, she is able to zero in and give the speaker her undivided attention. Her goal is to add value to the speaker. When Patti is giving a speech herself, she's also looking for value add from her evaluator. And in her closing comments, she reminded us that our connection to the speaker is just as important, if not more important, than the speech.